welcome to this special show. What a year it has been. It's been a great one for many, others not so much. A few days away from just getting to close down with the year 2021. And already we have gotten to see how many people have been excited, especially looking at how this is a festive period. But regardless of all of that, we have seen what 2021 has offered to many people across the globe. One of the biggest things that has been happening around the world is the issue of COVID-19. Getting to see how right here in Zambia, we were dealing with it, and as well as other people across the globe having to receive unfortunate news because of how it has been able to mutate, getting to talk about the Omicron and just overall so many things that have been happening. Tonight on the show, we get to focus more on what 2021 has been like and what does 2022 hold for us as we get to cross over in just a few days from now. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Justin Mulenga. We will be getting to discuss and connect with four individuals in different parts of the world. From the United States, joining me is a governance expert in Arongambi. From Denmark, Misheck Kakonde, a politician, a political historian, and from Nigeria, Olatunya Tobi, part of One United Africa, and from Turkey, Robert Kunda, who is a foreign policy analyst. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good evening, thank you.
Good to be with you, Justin.
Let's begin firstly with you, Mr. Kakonde. Maybe we could get to discuss a little bit about Denmark. There's so much that has been happening, especially with the issue on immigration. And we did see Denmark's former immigration minister and how she was sentenced to 2 months in prison after a special court found her guilty of illegally separating several couples of asylum seekers where the female member was a minor. Just briefly tell us about the immigration situation over in Denmark and what exactly has happened here with the minister.
Well, the immigration system of Scandinavia is quite interesting. And, looking at issues to do with the minister, I would not dive much into the whole ordeal, realizing that the fact, is in court and, happenings, or let me say hearings are on. But you must understand to say, as long as you're on the right side of history or the right side of, the law, you would be able to be allowed to be in Denmark. Mostly maybe it's issues to do with, differences in terms of extremism. I always hold a view that whenever we are practicing religion, we must not be as extremist as much as possible, be it Christianity, be it Islam. It's just a matter of how you handle religion. So mostly many of all the issues, I think they revolve around issues to do with religion. And basically, I think for me, I believe to say, as long as you're on the right side of history, you will be able to be given asylum here in Denmark or elsewhere within the Scandinavia. Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to you on that because this still seems to be an issue, especially when we talk about the Syrians and how a lot has been happening in that regard. But let's engage Robert and just discuss a little bit about what's happening with regards to the surge in Turkey's Lira. We know how this has been happening, the volatility of the currency there, and how this has been happening this particular year, 2021. It has raised concern in the stock market, prompting so many investors to just hunker down for a new era of elevated volatility. Now, help us understand a little bit with what's happening over there, especially with regards to what is leading to the volatility of the Turkish Lira. Robert.
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, I would like to say what is causing the volatility currently is because of the changing policies that are being implemented. Now, we must understand that Turkey is one of the major economies. And now, when you look at the way the currency is performing, most of the people are actually trying to, are asking the same question, what is happening? So overall, the first thing that we should try to understand is that government, when a year is beginning, they try to bring in policies that are going to change the way things are. So when we talk about the volatility of the dollar against the Turkish lira, you discover that government in the last few months, they've been trying to implement policies that are going to ensure that they have a stable economy. Now, before they started doing this, there was the issue of the coronavirus. Turkey was not spared, just like in other countries. So currently, one of the issues that we have at hand is the Turkish lira is changing because of the current policies that the government is trying to implement.
Well, we're getting to discuss more on that, especially with some of the resolutions that the president there over in Turkey will be getting to implement, seeing how he did participate at a major summit of African heads in Istanbul. But let's go the way to Nigeria and just find out from Tobi what exactly is happening there. I do know, Tobi, that you have been to Zambia recently, especially when we did see the unfortunate death of our founding father, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. You and One United Africa were here. But describe to us, just in general, the relation between Zambia and Nigeria.
Oh, thank you, Justin. It's another privilege. It's a very big privilege to be on here with you guys again. Like I always tell you, Zambia is now my second home, and I think you need to be adding that fact to your talkings anytime we're talking. I've really missed Zambia. I plan coming to Zambia this Christmas, but all the same, my mind, my spirit is still with you guys. And overall, it's a very wonderful year here in Nigeria, and you see so many beautiful things happened to Nigerian and Nigerians. One of it is the fact that our very own Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was elected as the first and only World Trade African that will be the World Trade Director General. So it's a very huge one for Africa, not only Nigeria, but for Africa as a whole. So kudos to them. And like you said earlier, there's been a lot of trying time for us all over the world because of COVID. And there are some steps that are taken by the Nigerian government that we really need to applaud them for, because at some point African countries were placed on the red list because of COVID, Omicron, so to say, of recent. And the Nigerian government stood their ground and said, no, that Africans are not the cause of these issues. And so for that reason, then no nation should place Africans, not only Nigerian, but Africans, on any red list. And there are some measures were taken, and it's yielded a positive result. Immediately when they took their stand, they reversed all their decisions. So it's a very trying time for the world, for Africa, for Nigeria. But again, against all odds, it has been a successful year so far. We're looking forward for another beautiful years where Africa as a whole will be having impact in the decision taking all over the world.
Well, Tobi, Nigeria has been facing its own problems as well, just away from Africa. And I do know that the hashtag #EndSARS has been constantly used on the Twitter platform. We'll get to discuss that soon. But let me engage Misheck again, and let's just focus now still on the issue of the Syrians. So recently, Misheck, just coming to you, the government did ask at least 90 Syrians to return to what they're terming as safe Syria. Now, many are now languishing in deportation facilities. Is Denmark really being pressured to reverse its refugee policies? What is the situation around this?
Well, thank you for that intelligent question. Looking at the fact that I'm an expert for the whole Middle East, that's my specialty. Well, we must understand to say, the refugee crisis situation within the EU is, has been piling up, and it's not just the first time that such a situation is happening. But you must understand to say there are other outside political players within the Middle East, or the MENA region, as we call it. You must understand to say Russia has got an interest within, Syria itself, and there's aspects of hegemony, among the Americans and the like. So there are different, aspects, in terms of activities within the Middle East. But one thing we must understand is that, Denmark is always open. I think I understand, in terms of, allowing some refugees. It's not that it just closes up to each and every person. That is just, from my observation. But what depends is what number do we take in, or what number does the government itself, takes in. So there are different, players. The EU would always sit and say, okay, how many numbers are going to be in Germany? How many numbers are going to be maybe in other EU countries? So I think, the crisis itself is big, and I believe that, it will continue, and it's got, side effects. We are in the global world now. So if a situation that happens, let's say in Syria, has got an effect in the EU, United States, or even in Asia. So it's a matter of having, having, countries that care for each and every country so that, the situation does not, let's say, go out of hand. Take, for instance, COVID-19. People thought it would just be within, a point of a place where it was, contacted or, let's say, discovered first in Wuhan, but it is something that was found in most parts of the world. So even issues to do with conflict resolution, I think that better all states sit down and, find a lasting solution to a problem. I think that is the best way to go about even refugee crisis that, because it is a fact. As long as the refugee crisis continues, people would always run towards, the Turkish border and also try to find themselves towards, the other countries within the EU. Yeah. I understand Turkey, of course, finds it challenging because it is the border point. And in the end, they just say, okay, we're opening the gates towards the EU. So I think the best is to find solutions on how states can be stabilized, not just in Africa, but also South, America, where there are challenges, even in Asia. There's no country that is perfect. Even here in Denmark, everything is not perfect. But it's just a level at which development has been achieved. Yeah.
Let's go over to the United States and engage Mr. Ngambi. He's been able to assist us on many occasions with regards to everything related to governance issues. Ms. Ngambi, you're joining us at a very fortunate time because we will be going to the polls again when we talk about the elections. In this case, we're looking at parliamentary by-elections and council ward elections, which are scheduled to take place on the 20th of January 2022. Now, a few moments ago, we did get to witness the filing in of nominations, and we did see 9 political parties just engage during this particular period, and as well as 1 independent candidate who did go ahead and file in their nomination. But generally, this year has been a good one for Zambia, and I'm saying so because we recently went to the polls, and we also did get to see ourselves just elect a new leader. Just briefly tell us overall how the general elections were.
Well, Justin, thank you for having me. You will recall that at the beginning of this year, we had the then opposition party, the United Party for National Development, UPND, and its alliance partners, who are now in government, declared that this year will be the year of change. And there are other people that, talked about those sentiments as well. There was a lot of expectations as we were headed towards the August 12th elections. I remember that I wrote an article in the Mass newspaper on January 7th of 2021, and I described this year as a year of promise. And so we have seen that as we came towards the elections in August, it was not a perfect process. Unfortunately, there were some pockets of violence here and there. And overall, the process went on, and we saw the change of government. The Patriotic Front lost the elections to the UPND alliance partners. So that was a huge, huge transformation for the country. But it was not the first time that we've seen change of government. I mean, the Zambian people voted one political party in and voted one out. And so this happened this year, and we have a new government. And right now, this government is barely about 200 days in power, in fact, less than that. And they're trying to find their way and figure out how to do certain things. Now, we do have by-elections coming up in Kawata and other areas. But that is a process of democracy. Democracy is not an event. It is a process where there's an electoral process to it. There's voter education, there's engagement of citizens, there's civil society participation in the governance issues of the country. That is all part of the process of democracy. So this will not be the first and last by-elections that we see. In the next 5 years that the UPND alliance partners are in power, there'll be more by-elections, whether at the parliamentary level and local government level. And so we only hope that what we learned in August of 12 general elections, in terms of the elections being somewhat peaceful and free and fair, is what will, precipitate what happens going forward. Meaning that as we go on before 2026, when we have the next general election, whatever election we're engaged in or the electoral process we're engaged in, they'll be just as peaceful as what we saw in August of this year.
Well, the UPND now have been in government a little over 100 days, and so much has happened within this space, seeing how some of the decisions that they're making have been questioned by the many Zambians out there, the stakeholders, just talking about some of the decisions that they're making. For example, the IMF bailout package, and as well just looking at some of the things that they've constantly been implementing, from the appointments that the president has made, and other issues. But just generally from your end, how would you describe how the UPND government now has been performing after being in office a little over 100 days?
Well, when you're in office for about 100 days, whatever you do sets the tone or projects what will be achievable as you stay in office for 5 years or for whatever period is stipulated in the Constitution. So it is very crucial that the UPND alliance partners, in fact, President Hakainde Hichilema, whatever he does in this period, sends the signal to the Zambian people. I mean, when you look at the campaign promises that we saw when they were in the opposition, he talked about fighting corruption. He talked about how he was going to restructure the debt. He was talking about all sorts of things, how he would give freedoms back to the Zambian people who felt like their freedoms are restricted in terms of expressing themselves and in terms of freedom of assembly. And so what we have seen in the last 100 days plus is that the UPND alliance partners, in fact, if you listen to their spokesperson and you listen to their party spokesperson, you're going to see that they seem to be proud of what they have achieved. They seem to have scored, in one way or the other. But also, there's been a lot of criticism as well on the other side. There's been people that have talked about how they've walked back on some of the promises, or how they have removed subsidies and increased, the electricity tariffs, which will go up, and the fuel prices, which have gone up. And so, and when they're in the opposition, people will say that President Hakainde Hichilema promised the opposite. So it depends on what perspective you look at that. And it also depends on how you understand what they're doing now and what they intend to do. But overall, I think that there's a general feeling of satisfaction in the country, but yet there's still more that needs to be done.
Well, I'm getting back to you because there has been an issue that has raised so many questions, especially amongst parents, guardians, seeing how the COVID-19 is still here with us, and there's a lot that has been happening recently, especially during this week. We did get to see the Ministry of Health here in the country introduce very interesting things, the COVID-19 booster shots, and as well as introduction to vaccination in children. I know this is something that has been debated upon across the world, but I'll be coming back to you on that. Let me engage Robert now as we look at the issue still in Istanbul and the major summit of African heads that took place there. So Turkey now apparently is aiming to deepen economic and military ties on Africa. Robert, now just describe to us, how do you think this could better the relations between Zambia and Turkey, especially with regards to economic growth?
Okay, thank you very much for that wonderful question. So what we should try to understand here is that Turkey is currently looking for new markets, and Africa presents an opportunity to provide the raw materials, like you have mentioned, for them to produce a lot of things that they need. So what is important is, number one, they have provided a platform where they invite leaders from Africa to come and have these issues discussed, and then sign agreements on how they are going to how they are going to be doing these agreements. So, for example, Turkey now wants to start producing and selling their armored vehicles. So, where do they sell these things? Which markets are ready? And when you look at Africa, Africa is huge and it is ripe for that kind of market. Secondly, it's what they produce. They produce quality textiles, and the market here is kind of saturated. And when you look at Africa, for them, it is an opportunity. So how can Zambia in particular benefit from such kind of a platform? Zambia needs to prepare its foreign policy and make sure that that foreign policy fits well for its development agenda. We are talking of the technical aspect, we are talking of the trade agreements that should be signed. And as they do this, they should ensure that the private sector is well informed and well engaged, so that when these two countries meet to produce these things and the raw materials that are available, it will be better for the two countries.
Well, thank you so much for that response. We'll be coming back to you soon. We'll be getting into a break. But before we get into that, I did briefly talk to Toby with regards to the hashtag #EndSIRS that is being used on different social media platforms to disclose the unruly conduct of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad over in Nigeria. Now, Toby, this year has been, well, not so great for so many countries, and in this case Nigeria as well, especially with regards to ending SIRS. Now, what is the status with regards to just ending SIRS, especially now that we're closing down with the year? What's the response from the Nigerian government on this issue, this law enforcement agency harassing many Nigerian people? Toby, can you hear me? All right, we seem to have lost him there, but you're watching this special show.
Thank you so much, Justin. Before I go into that, let me say something earlier about the relationship between Zambia and Nigeria. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
The relationship between Nigeria and Zambia. It has been a very smooth run. You know, you are aware of the fact that our former president, the person of President Olusegun Obasanjo, who happens to be one of our leading fathers in war in United Africa too, is in Zambia doing the inauguration of HH. So it tells you how the bond is still as strong as before. Now going to the EndSARS protest. You see, you know, you would agree with me that EndSARS happened a few months after George Floyd in the United States of America. That's not this year, though. It happened 2020, where the youth, you know, rose up to the fact that there has been a lot of brutality from the policemen. And the fact remains that brutality is not even the only subject of matter. What really happened is that the youth really want good governance from our leaders. And aside from good governance, they also want the police of Nigeria to be treated right. And the truth of the matter is that I know there has been a lot of corrections that have been done. Of recent, it was announced that now our policemen will now be having 20% increment in their salary, which happens to be a product of the protest that EndSARS end for them. So it's not just about the brutality alone, it's also about the welfare of the police. Because if the police are treated right, they will not be exploiting the citizens, most especially the youth. And so it's a win-win for both the police and the youth. And I think there has been justice has been carried on. There have been incidents where the representative of the youth have been meeting with the Lagos State government where the EndSARS really happened, where they declared that there are massacre. And there has been talks, and I can be so sure that it will be there will be justice, and before you know it,
all right, Toby, we seem to
Nigerian youth and Nigeria as a whole. So it's a very good one, the high opening at that.
All right, we seem
it gave the government the eye opener that
Toby, we seem to be having a communication breakdown there. There should be some distortion in the network, but we'll get back to you on that. We'll be getting into a short break. You're watching this special show. What a year it has been. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we are focusing mainly on some of the events that have occurred in the year 2021. How this has affected you this particular year, negatively or positively, is what we are looking at. And feel free to be interactive with us from our Diamond TV Zambia Facebook page. And from there, we will be getting to respond to some of the comments that are coming through. After the break, we are discussing all things the mutation of COVID-19 and how this has impacted many countries. And we're looking at the Omicron and how this is believed to have started within the southern region. But has it really? All this and so much more after the break. Good evening, welcome back. You are still watching this special show brought to you by Diamond TV. We're looking at the overall year of 2021 and how this year has been to many. We are this evening joined by a governance expert, a political historian, a representative from One United Africa, and a foreign policy analyst. And we are focusing on some of the interesting things that we will be getting to highlight right here on the show. Mr. Ngami, let's get back to you and just start with the remarks from Robert much earlier on. You did say you'd like to give a comment with regards to Zambia's relations with Turkey. Please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to first of all thank Mr. Kunda for that comment he made about Turkey's strategic interest in Africa. What I wanted to say to that is that Zambia has to be very careful in terms of engaging with big economies such as Turkey. For example, when you remember during the era of the late President Michael Chilukasaki, actually just before he took over office, he was very popular for criticizing the Chinese activities in Zambia. You know, he used to say that when we bring in investors, we want these investors not to be selling chickens at the market, for example, you know. But then this is what we kind of seeing if we're not careful in terms of our Turkish partners. I mean, if you look at the block-making enterprise in Zambia, I mean, you drive from Lusaka all the way to Kitwe or Ndola, all you see are these businesses where people make blocks and pavers, and they're owned by the Turkish businesses. Why are the Zambian people not owning this small business enterprise? And so when we bring in these investors, we want them to engage in investment that the Zambian people perhaps do not have the capacity to do themselves, or they unwilling to actually engage in those enterprises. So an investor is someone that needs to bring value, not somebody that comes in and they do the jobs or the works that perhaps an ordinary Zambian can do. But that doesn't mean that we oppose any kind of investment. But when we go out there and negotiate these investments, we have to negotiate from the position of strength, not a position of weakness. Because what we've seen is that if you're not careful, the relationship between Zambia and Turkey will end up being like the relationship between Zambia and China. You know, not too long ago, France 24, which is a media outlet, did a detailed documentary about Zambia being exploited by China, which was very unfortunate. Those are not the narratives and the stories that we want to see in the media with relations to foreign policy, with relation to Zambia and its counterparts. Because under the administration of President Hakainde Hichilema, we've been told and we've been promised that the president is going to focus on what he's calling economic diplomacy, meaning that the economy will be at the heart of everything he does in terms of diplomacy, in terms of engaging in bilateral and multilateral relations. So we hope to see that, and I hope to see that the president puts up a team that will negotiate from a position of strength, that will have an influence even on big economies such as China, the US, India, Brazil, the EU, and Turkey itself. Because we cannot afford to be in a position where the people that come into our country are so-called investors, but they're exploiting our natural resources.
Mr. Ngambi, very interesting that you bring up the issue of the president. Yes, we have seen he has constantly mentioned that he is Zambia's #1 marketer. Seeing just after he was elected, he did travel to the United States. He eventually went to Scotland, Glasgow, and to South Africa, to Botswana. We've seen him in Malawi as well. With regards to these diplomatic travels that he is making, these diplomatic relations that he's trying to create with other countries across the world, do you think that there is positive result coming through from these trips that the president recently made?
Yes, I've heard the president say that he's the chief marketer for Zambia, and he has made these trips in an attempt to go and sell Zambia to the multilateral corporations, to big economies. And the president speaks well. You know, he's well articulate when he speaks on these platforms. I mean, I listened to him when he spoke at the United Nations, the first time when he addressed the General Assembly, soon after being elected. So it is one thing to be able to articulate issues, and it's another thing to actually put those things that you talk about into motion. And what it takes to do that is a team of people that are credible, people that are well equipped, people that are trained to be able to do that. So the question I have for the president, the question I have for the UPND alliance partners is that, do they have a team in place that will be able to champion what the president is saying in terms of economic diplomacy, to actualize those things, to bring those results back home to the Zambian people? That's one thing. The other thing I have to say is that, when this term was coined by the president, economic diplomacy, I quickly looked up one specific thing. In fact, I wrote an article again in the master's paper called The Case for Economic Diplomacy. And I argued in that article that most of the missions that we have abroad, diplomatic missions, Zambian diplomatic missions, you're going to find that even the position of trade attaché is vacant. And these trade attachés are supposed to be the strategic diplomats who sell the Zambian economy, the Zambian resources, the Zambian minerals out to the mission or the country that they are assigned to. And so when you have a mission abroad and it doesn't have a trade attaché, what does that say about the economic diplomacy policy that you want to implement? So these are the things that I think needs to be put into consideration. The president can speak well, but what kind of team does he have behind him? What kind of people has he trained to be able to actualize what he wants to actualize?
Let's go all the way to Denmark and engage Mr. Kakonde and just focus again on the issue of the former immigration minister and how she has been sentenced to 2 months imprisonment after she did get to find herself separating several couples of asylum seekers. Let's talk about the asylum seekers, Mr. Kakonde. Maybe you could just give us more detail with regards to what's happening here.
Well, basically, what I would comment on that is, she gave an illegal instruction to the departments under, the ministry. There, here in Denmark, there's a law where before you act, there's, scrutiny, or it must be, taken to the citizens. So that was not done, and, she found it a bit, hard, because the laws here are that you do not do things on your own or out of your own thinking. Yeah. So, for instance, she had in short done an illegality on issues to do with asylum seekers, and that I think didn't augur well, and that is why you're seeing a lot of issues around her. Yeah.
In Nigeria, Tobi, when we before we went for a break, we did talk about the hashtag #EndSARS, and we really couldn't get much of what you were saying. But maybe you could just give us very briefly information with regards to what the status is over there with regards to what's happening with the Special Anti-Robbery Squad.
Yeah, thank you so much, Justin. Like I said earlier, #EndSARS, yes, it's a campaign against police brutality. But again, it's also a vehicle to also, communicate the grievances of the Nigerian youth, grievances of bad governance, grievances of, so many other things. And I think they are able to list all those. We youth are able to list all those demands, and we place it in front of the government for them to, do, the needful. And one of it is that they also fought for the fact that our policemen are not catered for well. When you are not giving them what is needed, corruption is inevitable. So if you are paying them well, then they will have no reasons to exploit the Nigerian youth, to exploit the hardworking youth. Trying to put into their shackles what it is not theirs. So all of these things are the things the Nigerian youth communicate. And I always say, the #EndSARS protest is only a litmus test for the Nigerian government to know that the youth has the highest number of population in Nigeria, and that in the 2023 general election, they are also planning to replicate that in the election, because that's the purpose of democracy, where the people will come together and say, no, we don't want this. If you are not doing well, we're going to vote you out. So that is just it about the #EndSARS protest.
All right. Well, let's engage you, Robert, and just mainly focus on the president's recent travels. We understand that he was in Europe at some point, where he did participate in the 26th conference of the parties, where the conversation was mainly around climate change. Now, how would you describe how Zambia is creating diplomatic relations through the president having to attend things like this, having to participate in fighting climate change?
Thank you very much for that concern. Now, we have to understand that, like the president did indicate, that he is the chief marketer. So, focusing on the event that he attended recently, number one, we need to know that the rich countries, some time back in 2009, that pledged huge sums of money that said they're going to be sponsoring countries or economies that do not have enough money in order for them to shift to clean energy. So we have seen down the line, these huge economies, they're not fulfilling that. So Zambia's voice should be heard at such forums. And it is very important for the president to raise such concerns, to talk about those issues, because you discover that these huge economies, it's year in, year out, they talk about the same thing. We are going to help poor countries shift to clean energy. But 10 years down the line, nothing has happened. What are they doing? This should concern Zambia as a country. Secondly, we as a country, what is it that we are doing in order to move to clean energy? Are we just going to be depending on these big economies to donate huge sums of money in order for us to shift to clean energy? Or what are the measures that we're putting in to ensure that we stop the effects of climate change? Because we're not going to fold our hands and start waiting for these countries to help us. So we need to put in place policies that are going to help us and are going to help us mitigate the effects of climate change. Just recently, there was a huge talk about the rains being delayed. This is like a very, very clear indication that our policies on environment and anything to do with the climate, they should be very much emphasized, and they should be indicated in our foreign policy, that we are very clear about them, and we are serious, and we are going to do something about it before it's too late.
Well, but I can tell you this, we have seen a lot of farmers struggle with regards to what is happening now, the delay in the rains. We know what the statements have been from the Zambia Meteorological Department, and many farmers now just going as far as being diverse, implementing different strategies and practicing a lot of diversification and different irrigation systems. But let's talk about now something that has got the world's attention, and this is COVID-19. Now, scientists obviously believe that just like any other disease that humanity has had to deal with, COVID-19 would just be like these other diseases, meaning it might not be going away anytime soon. I'll come to you, Mr. Ngambi, and I come to you because we have seen the kind of relation that Zambia has had with the United States through the United States Embassy. We have seen the continuous donation of vaccines, specifically the Johnson & Johnson, and this obviously does look like the relation between Zambia and the United States is a strong one. There's a strong bond there. But with regards to the COVID-19 situation in the United States, we understand that, yes, the United States has been a major contributor, especially when you talk about the expedition in enhancing COVID-19 vaccines. But briefly tell us, what is the situation over there in terms of the confirmed cases and maybe just the number of deaths as well?
Thanks, Justin, for that. And before I make a comment on COVID-19, I'd like to agree with my brother, Mr. Kunda in Turkey, about what happened at the conference that was held in the summit that was held in Scotland, the climate summit, which the president attended. I think that what was impressive about that was that the president of Malawi, President Chakwera, who is the chairperson of SADC, Southern African Developing Countries, took a very strong stance. When he took the podium at that conference, at that summit, he sent a very strong signal out to the big countries, if you'd like, or the powerful economic countries. And he, in essence, said that they have not done enough. These big economies have not done enough in terms of living up to their promises. Year in and year out, they make commitments which they don't follow through. So I think that that example from President Chakwera should be commendable. But also, this is probably something that I would challenge my good brother Tobi on. I think that even the young people, the African people, should take the stance when it comes to climate change. One united Africa needs to be able to organize and mobilize, like what we saw in Nigeria, when the young people came together, ENSAS, that campaign. Something of that magnitude can send a strong signal to other countries and other economies that we mean well and we're serious about fighting climate change as Africans. And we want commitments to be followed through when these big economies say that they'll do that. But as far as COVID-19 is concerned, yes, it has been a very devastating, I think it's 2 years plus since COVID came to be with us. And in the United States, we saw many, many deaths. I mean, this was transitioning from end of 2019 to 2020. You talk about New York was the epicenter of COVID-19 here, and we had deaths in the thousands of people. And right now, as we speak, with the Omicron virus, the variant that has come up, we are talking about record numbers going up. I mean, the numbers are going up every day. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the last 3 days or so, about 100 domestic flights were canceled because the airlines are short-staffed because of the cases going up. And so it's becoming a little bit chaotic. I think that the Biden administration is overwhelmed because President Biden made an announcement that he's going to make available the self-test kits for COVID-19, 500 million self-test kits for COVID-19 to all Americans. This is how serious it is. So this variant is spreading very fast. The government is playing catch up. They're trying to encourage people to go out there and get vaccinated. Not every American is vaccinated. There are those that are still have resentments towards vaccines. But the government is doing everything they can. And for the Zambian people, lucky enough for us, we have President Hakainde Hichilema, who has repeatedly said he's vaccinated and he's encouraging Zambians to go out and get vaccinated. But we didn't see that kind of leadership with the previous administration. President Lungu did not even say if he was vaccinated or not.
Let's go back to Denmark and engage Mr. Kakonde. Before we look at the issue of COVID-19 in Europe, Mr. Kakonde, I would like to bring up an issue that has seemed to catch the attention of many people around the world, and this is the issue of racial remarks, racism happening in Denmark. I do have a few friends that are there, and one of the things that has constantly come up is on how there is a lot of hostility. The hostility threshold there is beyond imaginable, especially when we're talking about racism. Just help us understand what this is all about.
Thank you for that question. Well, personally, I have not experienced any of that challenge, and maybe it depends. Maybe because of my neck, I've talked about issues of racism and the like, and issues to do with racism. Let me put it in this way, comrade. They do happen even in Zambia. It just depends on who does it. I'll give you an example of this. Someone is passing, then you call them Muzungu. Don't you think that is racism in some way? It just depends on how you're doing it. So, people just need to be educated about it. And we must start conversing around such issues. And what comment I would give is, people feel low about themselves. That's why they feel like, talking ill of someone would be something that, motivates them. So it's those low-thinking people or people who feel low of their self-esteem that I think must engage in, racism. But it is a big issue, and we must be able to engage in dialogue and find a lasting solution about it. Because I think, humans are the same and there's no difference. It depends, on a person who thinks low of themselves that would, deem another person as being, lower on their ranks. Allow me also to comment on issues to do with climate, because I'm a climate enthusiast. We must able to engage also companies. Private companies must engage in issues to do with climate change. We have a lot of companies that are illegally, let's say, mining or maybe doing things in a wrong way without following the laid down procedures. So my advice to the current administration, the new Dawn government, is that they should try to tighten the current or the laws that we have, because laws are there, but we need to tighten some of these laws to ensure that companies live up to aspects to do with ESG, where you are climate friendly in terms of doing business. You cannot have a company that just comes to Zambia, doing any businesses, and they are not respecting the local communities themselves. Yeah. So that is one area I would advise on. And, because if you have, companies that take the lead in terms of doing business or doing, aspects to do with climate change, then that would be the best way to go. And schools also or universities should engage and start discussing, because climate change is a serious issue, and we must be able to engage on that. And also, if you can allow me to, comment on the 100, days of the New Dawn administration. Like Comrade Ngambi had mentioned, there are two side views. Others, are considering that they've done well in terms of doing things. I would give an example of how, they've done better in terms of, human rights. I think this is one of also the things that the president, mentioned during the UN General Assembly. Human rights, I think, the scoreboard on that the UPND is doing fine, because you can see that from the time the transition was done, the cadres, are able to behave well. I was in Lusaka a few days ago. I could see how people are behaving, in the streets. You can put on, green T-shirt labeled PF, no one will attack you. Or you can put on, UPND, no one will attack you. So in terms of human rights, we're doing, or let me say the UPND is doing fine. There are aspects to do with the press. The press is an important, component of any economy. And, press, if there's respect for press, then we are able to, to head in the right direction. Tenets of democracy also entail that, the opposition should be able to, provide checks and balances. But I'm with the view that checks and balances shouldn't be on, pertinent issue, or let me say, minor issues, in fact, minor issues where you're discussing on how the president sits and the like. I think that doesn't augur well. The opposition should be able to engage on how the nation is going, what direction the current administration is taking and the like. So if we are able to engage in that, that would be the best way to go. And, you understand to say we lost our founding father, and condolences again to the, first family. But, KK was one person that, shaped our history as a country. And if you look back, even in terms of diplomacy, he put up a very good team. So if the New Dawn administration, just like Comrade Aaron had mentioned, would put up a team that is well researched in terms of doing economic diplomacy, just like the president says, we will be having a country that has got direction where they are headed in terms of diplomacy, not whereby, we have the China, Zambia situation. So we need diplomats that understand what they are supposed to do. I appreciate it.
Let's go all the way to Mr. Ngambi again. Before we get to conclude, my director said we have a few minutes before we get to wrap up. I know that Tobi has disconnected, but I really wanted to engage him on something very interesting. But Mr. Ngambi, the issue of politics in the United States is very interesting, and there has been concern on whether the United States is politically bankrupt. Now, I do know that recently a U.S. Senate did avert a crisis over the federal debt issue there. Just briefly bring us to life with regards to this situation over there.
Well, when it comes to politics in the United States, it's very polarizing at times. I mean, you look at the right and the left, and sometimes it's extremely difficult to get anything done through a bipartisan bill. So it depends. But one thing that you can be well assured of is that in a crisis, in a moment of crisis, it doesn't matter to what party you belong to, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, the American people come together and stand up for the country. I mean, we saw what happened in the early days of COVID-19. Like I said, when thousands of lives are being lost, people put their politics and their partisans aside, and they come to the fore and work together. But of course, during a political season, Like, the midterm elections will be coming up. Every 2 years they have midterm elections, and then every 4 years they have the presidential elections. So whenever we're getting close to midterm elections, whenever we're getting close to any election period, what you see is a lot of debate and dialogue. The debt ceiling, the recent debt ceiling, they start, trying to battle us to make everything political. Should we go over the debt ceiling or not? Is the government going to default or not? And so previously, the last few days, we saw that the government of President Biden had to extend its debt ceiling. And that was a victory by a very small margin, I think by one vote, if I'm not mistaken. It was a 50 to 49 vote. And at the end of the day, of course, the majority carries the day. But what I'm trying to say to you is that what we see in America is basically what it is everywhere. In Zambia, when it's election season, it's time to politicize. They politicize everything. Look at the Kawata by-election that is coming up. You're going to see a lot of politics on every issue, even issues that are not supposed to be politicized, because that is the nature of who we are. We're humans. We have to do everything we can to appeal to those that we want to support us, enable for us to achieve our political goals. But nonetheless, I think that over and above, for us, fortunately, the previous elections in August taught us a lesson. Right after the elections, when someone wins an election, we all come together and try to support those people elected to see if they can win in delivering development to the country. So we hope that the Zambian people who supported and voted for the UPND Alliance government by almost 2.8 million plus votes, they can come together and support this government so the government can succeed and Zambia succeeds. But when it's come to politicking, of course, when there's a by-election, we expect politics to be at play.
Well, as we get to conclude very briefly, let's go back to Turkey and just engage Robert with regards to the issue of COVID-19 and the mutation of it, seeing what's happening with Omicron over there. But Robert, very briefly, as you get to close up the show, I'd like to find out what is the status there with the issue of COVID-19?
Currently, Turkey has done so well when it comes to the COVID situation. They are managing it. They are doing everything they can to ensure that the citizens are safe. As we talk, just a few days ago, they launched their vaccine called Trucovac. So in this area, not everything is okay, but they are very much they're controlling the situation. And as of Omicron, we haven't seen so many cases of Omicron, but they are there in Turkey. But for the vaccine, most of the people are encouraged to get vaccinated, and everyone is doing that.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, we were discussing with a governance expert in Aaron Ngambi, a political historian, Misheck Kakonde, and as well as Olatunya Tobi, part of One United Africa, and a foreign policy analyst, Robert Kunda, discussing the 2021 issues that have been affecting many. Overall, looking at just what has been of concern and whether these things have been rectified by our governments or not. But with regards to the situation around COVID-19, this is something that we're still battling and possibly going to even connect with into 2022. Thank you so much to you, the viewer, for being a part of the show tonight. My name is Justin Mulenga. Good evening.